The next thing we're going to talk about is how a bill becomes a law. And we have to start out talking about the different types of committees. Committees are really important because that's where almost all of the work in Congress is done. The majority party always has the majority of seats in a committee, which means since the Republicans hold the majority in the House of Representatives, the majority of the members on every single committee are Republicans. In the Senate, since the majority is controlled by the Democrats, the majority of seats in every single committee are held by the Democrats. Committee chair, extremely important position. Nothing happens in a committee without the permission of a chairman. And once again, the majority party controls these. Every single committee chair in the House is a Republican. Every single committee chair in the Senate is a Democrat. They set the agenda for the committee. Like I said, nothing happens in a committee unless the committee chairman wants it to. The committee chairmen are also the most senior members of the Senate or House of Representatives on those particular committees. So it's extremely important to have the majority in these in the House and the Senate because the majority party controls everything that happens. Different types of committee. The first one, standing committees. These are permanent subject matter committees. Originally, when Congress was first created, anytime someone would introduce a bill, they would form a committee to work on that particular bill. You can see how that could be a problem with 435 members in the House, 100 members in the Senate, all proposing bills all of the time. We have thousands and thousands of bills, and it would be impossible to create a committee now for every single one of those. So what they decided was to create subject matter committees. So anytime something is submitted in the House or the Senate, they look at the subject matter. The presiding officer, the Speaker in the House, and the Majority Leader in the Senate look at what that subject matter is about, and they are the ones that get to determine which committee, standing committee, that bill goes to. This is also really important because depending on what committee they decide to send it to, they can determine the outcome of that bill. If you have a bill that deals with pesticides, if you send it to an agricultural committee, they're going to respond to that in a much different way than an environmental committee. So if they want it to do well, they could send that pesticide bill to the agricultural committee, who is probably going to look at that favorably. If you want to kill the bill, go ahead and send that to the environmental committee, who probably doesn't look too kindly to pesticides. So at that point, the presiding officer, if they want to, can really determine the outcome of that bill by which committee that they send it to. The fate of most bills is decided in this committee, and almost all the bills that are submitted die in some sort of standing committee. Subcommittees, real easy, are just a subdivision of the main committee. Obviously, you don't want everyone in the committee to look at every single bill, so they once again divide that committee up into smaller ones so that they can refer those to the appropriate subcommittee. And these people generally have been in there for a while, and they are experts on that particular subject. House Rules Committee, this is only in the House of Representatives. Because there are so many in the House of Representatives, they need another committee in a way to sift through these once again. It's just another opportunity for this bill to die. The House Rules Committee does exactly what it says. It controls the flow of the bill. It sets the rules for it, how long it can be discussed and debated, can we amend it, how much can we amend it. So they attach basically all the rules to this before it can go to the whole entire 435 members of the House of Representatives. Select committees. These are special types of committees that are typically organized for some sort of specific purpose. There was a select committee put together to investigate what happened on 9/11. There was a select committee to investigate Watergate. Now that we no longer need these committees, they no longer exist. Joint committees have members of both the House and the Senate. And then conference committee, this is a really important committee. A bill must go through the House and the Senate, and once it gets through both of these houses, before you can give it to the President, the bill has to be in identical form. Most of the time that doesn't happen. Once a bill goes through one house, by the time it goes through the whole entire process in another house, it's a completely different bill. So what they do in a conference committee is they bring members of both the House and the Senate from the original standing committee where those originated, and they iron out the differences in the two bills to come up with a compromise bill, sometimes called a conference bill. That bill still has to go back and be voted on by the House and the Senate, but likely that is going to go ahead and get passed. This is a list of all of the standing Senate committees, the special and select committees, and then the joint committees. Notice there are 4 joint committees. Those have members of the House and the Senate. So when we look at the list of House committees, well, I don't think those are actually listed, but those are the 4 joint committees that the House and Senate both have. Special and select, there's a select committee on ethics, which means if there is a problem with one of their members doing something wrong, they're going to look at that, and then you'll notice all of the different types of standing committees. So based on the subject matter of the bill, it's going to go to that particular committee. This is a list of all the committees in the House. These are the standing committees, and there is a list at the end of that with the joint committees, and it's the same 4 that were in the Senate. If you'll notice the Ways and Means Committee, that one's really important, and both of them have something similar to that. It's not called that in the Senate, but in the House, the Ways and Means is the Committee on Taxation, and we talked about if there's going to be a bill that's going to increase your taxes, it has to start in this committee. The other one that's in both of them is the Appropriations Committee. Once again, any bill that deals with spending your money has to start in the House of Representatives in this Appropriations Committee. A bill is just another term for a proposed law. There are around 10,000 bills that are introduced every year, and less than 10% of those become law. Most bills, 90% of bills, die in some sort of committee. And we've talked about the revenue raising and the appropriations bills having to originate in the House of Representatives. A couple other terms that we're going to be using throughout is this idea of a rider. Usually what happens, especially on appropriations bills, spending bills that they know are going to be passed, members of Congress will typically attach things that they would like to see passed, and they usually have nothing to do with that appropriations bill. They know that eventually those bills are going to be passed through, like we saw this last month, and so they're just attach an unrelated bill or an unrelated amendment and watch it basically ride through the process and become law as part of that bill. A Christmas tree bill has a lot of riders attached to it, and that happens. They all know these bills are going to get passed eventually, and it's either an up or down. You have to take the whole thing or veto the whole thing as the president, so they go ahead and attach those riders to a bill. Bills can be introduced in either the House or the Senate. Once it's introduced, a bill is assigned a number, and originally they would read the whole entire bill because there were members when Congress was first established, when our government was first established, who couldn't read. So they would actually read every single bill in its entirety. Now a reading is just they read the number. But then once again, we talked about earlier, the presiding officer gives it to the appropriate standing committee. A couple of terms that we're going to use: pigeonhole and discharge petition. Pigeonhole comes from a term that's used when you're looking at a roll-top desk. Those desks have little nooks, little cubbies where you can put papers in, and a lot of times they are so full nobody remembers what's in there. You can't ever find anything. So anytime they're talking about a bill that's died in committee, they say it's been pigeonholed. Discharge petition is the process of getting a pigeonholed bill out of committee so a vote can be taken. So if you have a committee chair or even the Speaker of the House who says this isn't going to come to a vote, if enough members of either the House or Senate want that bill to come to a vote, they can do what's called a discharge petition. And I'm going to show a short video where Nancy Pelosi actually is discussing the potential of doing what's called a discharge petition.
As you know, as we've been saying, as the President has said, he has his pen in hand. He is ready to sign a middle-income tax cut. Last July, that legislation passed the United States Senate. Similar, exact same bill was introduced in the House. at that time. And since then, we have been asking the Republican leadership to bring the middle income tax cut to the floor. The clock is ticking. The year is ending. It's really important with tax legislation for it to happen now. We're calling upon the Republican leadership in the House to bring this legislation to the floor next week. We believe that not doing that would be holding middle income tax cuts hostage to tax cuts for the rich. Tax cuts for the rich, which do not create jobs, just increase the deficit, heaping mountains of debt onto future generations. And so, to that end, we will be if there's no announcement of scheduling of the middle income tax cut, which, by the way, has tremendous support in the Republican caucus, I think we would get 100% vote on it if it came to the floor. If it is not scheduled, then on Tuesday we will be introducing a discharge petition, which if we could get 218 signatures, would bring the bill automatically to the floor. That would mean that we need some Republicans who support middle income tax cuts to sign on with us.